quick reminder, please remember to turn off your cell phones. Good. Hello. Those of you who are going to need interpreting, that your pieces are in the back. Okay, this is a great crowd. I'm really happy to see all of you here. So many students who are in their midterms now, but they're here. Great to see you all here, and faculty and staff. My name is Shoshana Bakyan. I teach teaching translation and English at AUA. I want to welcome you on behalf of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, all of you, to this reading event that's co-organized with the U.S. Embassy and the Armenian Literature Foundation. I would like to invite now the president of AUA, Dr. Armenia, to welcome everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Amakian. I want to welcome you here. I'm particularly glad to see so many students in this event. You know, one of the measures of quality of a university is the kinds of events it holds. And I'm very pleased that this event is being held at our university with support of the U.S. Embassy. So I'm grateful for that. I'm also particularly thankful to Dr. Avakian for doing all the work behind this. And special thanks to our poets. Enjoy the event. Thank you.
I would like to invite now Hasmik Mikhailian from the U.S. Embassy to say a couple words.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hasmik Mikhailian, representing the Education and Cultural Department of the U.S. Embassy, and I'm very pleased to be here today. And first, I would like to extend my thanks to AUA for organizing this event, for hosting this event for us. For us, the U.S. Embassy is honored to welcome and to host our guests, American writers, who are here as part of the International Writing Program of the University of Iowa, supported by the U.S. Department of State. And the goal of this program, because that's the question I would normally receive from everyone and the press too, is to engage young writers in Armenia by offering them new skills, because as part of this program, Our authors offered a series of workshops. And then we also encourage dialogue and collaboration between writers and teachers in Armenia and the United States. And finally, we create opportunities for colleagues and students to meet with distinguished representatives from American literacy scene. And this program has a continuation. And the continuation of this program will take place in summer 2015, when a group of young writers from Armenia will join a group of young writers from the United States and Turkey for a two-week residency program. And now I am very pleased and honored to pass the floor to Christopher Merrill, who is also, besides being a poet and writer, is also directing the program, and he will introduce our guest. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the president of this distinguished university. I've had the good luck to visit American universities in Beirut and Sharjah and in Iraq, and it's a thrill to be here in Armenia today. The International Writing Program has been bringing distinguished writers from around the world to Iowa City, which is a UNESCO city of literature, for nearly 50 years. We do this under the auspices of the U.S. State Department. And I'm very grateful to Nancy Van Horn and her colleagues at the embassy here for inviting us to be here for these days, to engage with writers and with students, and to have a chance to visit this very beautiful country. The format for this afternoon is we have great American writers here who are each going to introduce themselves, say just a few words about who they are, then they'll read a short selection of their work, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. And I think it should be a pretty lively afternoon. We're going to start with Gish Jen, who's coming to us from Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. As some of you may know, Cambridge, Massachusetts is actually the sister city to Yerevan. So I'm very, very, very pleased to be here. I've heard so much about Armenia over the years. I am a novelist, and I'm especially a novelist interested in issues having to do with identity and also, I will say, cultural intermixing, as you'll hear from this thing that I'm about to read. This is the beginning of a story called Who's Irish? And it's told from the point of view of a Chinese grandmother. In China, people say mixed children are supposed to be smart. And definitely my granddaughter, Sophie, smart. But Sophie is wild. Sophie is not like my daughter, Natalie, or like me. I am worked hard my whole life and fierce besides. My husband always used to say he's afraid of me. And in our restaurant, busboys and cooks are all afraid of me too. Even the gang members come for protection money. They try to talk to my husband. When I am here, they stay away. If they come by mistake, they pretend they are come to eat. They hide behind the menu, order a lot of food. They talk about their mother. Oh, my mother has some arthritis, need to take herbal medicine, they say. Oh, my mother getting old, her hair all white now. I say, your mother's hair used to be white, but since she died, it become black again. Why don't you go home once in a while, take a look? I tell them, Confucius say, a filial son know what color his mother's hair is. My daughter is fierce too. She is vice president of the bank now. Her new house is big enough for everybody have their own room, including me. But Sophie take after Natalie's husband family. Their name is Shay, Irish. I always thought Irish people are like Chinese people, work so hard on the railroad. But now I know why the Chinese beat the Irish. Of course, not all Irish are like the Shea family. Of course not. My daughter tell me I should not say Irish this, Irish that. How do you like it when people say Chinese this, Chinese that, she say. You know, the British call the Irish heathen, just like they call the Chinese, she say. You think the Opium War was bad? How would you like to live right next door to the British, she say. That is that. My daughter have a funny habit when she win an argument. She'd take a sip of something and look away so the other person is not embarrassed. So I am not embarrassed. I do not call anybody anything either. I just happened to mention about the Shea family an interesting fact. 4 brothers in the family, and not one of them work. The mother best have a job before she got sick. She was executive secretary in a big company. She's handled everything for a big shot. You will be surprised how complicated her job is. Not just type this, type that. Now she is a nice woman with a clean house. But her boys, every one of them is on welfare, so-called severance pay, so-called disability pay, something. They say they cannot find work. This is not the economy of the 50s, but I say, even the black people doing better these days. Southern live so fancy, you'd be surprised. Why the Shea family have so much trouble? They are white people. They speak English. When I come to this country, I have no money, do not speak English. But my husband and I own our own restaurant before he died. Free and mortgage, free and clear, no mortgage. Of course, I understand I am just lucky. Come from a country where the food is popular all over the world. I understand it is not the Shea family fault. They come from a country where everything is boiled. Still, I say, she's right. We should broaden our horizons, say one brother Jim at Thanksgiving. Forget about the car business. Think about egg rolls. Pad Thai, say another brother Mike. I'm going to make my fortune in Pad Thai. It's going to be the new pizza. I say, you people too picky about what you sell. Selling egg roll not good enough for you, but at least my husband and I can say we made it. What can you say? Tell me, what can you say? Everybody chew their tough turkey. I especially cannot understand my daughter husband John, who have no job but cannot take care of Sophie either, because he is a man, he say, and that is the end of the sentence. Plain boiled food, plain boiled thinking. Even his name is plain boiled, John. Maybe because I grew up with black bean sauce, hoisin sauce, garlic sauce, I always feel something is missing when my son-in-law talk. But all right, I take care of Sophie. Sophie is 3 years old, American age, but already I see her nice Chinese side swallowed up by her wild Shea side. She looked like mostly Chinese. Beautiful black hair, beautiful black eyes, nose perfect size, not so flat, looked like something fell down, not so large, looked like some big deal got stuck in wrong face. Everything just right. Only her skin is a brown surprise to John's family. So brown, they say. Even John say it. She never goes in the sun, still she's that color, he say. They say, brown. They say, nothing the matter with brown. They are just surprised. So brown. Natty is not that brown, they say. It seems like Sophie should be a color in between Natty and John. Seems funny, a girl named Sophie Shea be brown. But she is brown. Maybe her name should be Sophie Brown. She'd never go in the sun. Still she is that color, they say. Nothing the matter with brown. They are just surprised. The Shea family talk is like this sometimes. Go around and around like a Christmas tree train. Maybe John is not her father, I say, one day to stop the train. And sure enough, train wreck. None of the brothers ever say the word brown to me again. Instead, John's brother Bess say, I hope you're not offended. She said, I did my best on those boys, but raising 4 boys with no father is no picnic. You have a beautiful family, I say. I'm getting old, she said. You deserve a rest, I say. Too many boys make you old. I never had a daughter, she said. You have a daughter. I have a daughter, I say. Chinese people don't think a daughter is so great, but you're right. I have a daughter. I was never against the marriage, you know, she said. I never thought John was marrying down. I always thought Natty was just as good as white. I never against the marriage either, I say. I just wonder if they look at the whole problem. Of course you pointed out the problem. You were a mother, she said. And now we have a granddaughter. A little brown granddaughter. She is so precious to me. I laugh. A little brown granddaughter, I say, to tell you the truth, I don't know how she came out so brown. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Gish. One of the designs of this tour was to be bringing writers from many different backgrounds in America, and our next writer, Gregory Orfalea, comes to us from California. He's also written about Arab Americans, and he writes poetry, fiction, the whole spectrum.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Armenia and AUA, for having us. I think one of the attractions when I was sort of bowled over when Chris invited me to come on this trip was that, I was sort of looking for my family. And although my family originates mostly from Syria, Homs, Orfala min Urfa. So I'm looking into Urfa, and I went to the Moktadaram. How do we pronounce the archive again? Matan Adaram. I was there this afternoon, and I found an archivist who knows a lot about Urfa, so I think the journey has begun. We will see you again. Our students have been great. Voskeda, one of the students in class today, writing about a first love. We were writing about first love, which everyone seems to have sooner or later. I said, don't forget to write what your first love looks like. And Voskeda put up her hand, and I said, well, what does he look like? And she says, nothing. I said, how can that be? She says, he was on the phone. That Armenian humor, I just read you one sentence from my latest book, and then I'll move on to a short story. The sentence is a goodbye to his parents from Junipero Serra, a Spanish priest who lived in the 18th century on the island of Majorca, off the coast of Spain. He left it when he was 36, and he never came back. And he founded the state of California. He was the first European to walk into California in 1769 and not go back. He didn't know how to say goodbye to his parents. He felt if he saw them straight on, he would never leave. So he wrote the letter from Cadiz, which is the mainland of Spain, pretty far away from Majorca. And he didn't even send it to them. He sent it to a cousin. And in the letter he said, strive to prepare for a happy death. Strive to prepare for a happy death, which is the most important thing in life. For if we reach that goal, it matters little if we lose all the rest. But if we do not reach it, nothing else will have mattered. The book is called Journey to the Sun. Okay, I'm just going to put my watch down so I don't go too far. Probably lost half of my time. And I'm going to read the very beginning of a story called Brother of Figs, which I think you have there in English and Armenian. And I'm going to read the very end of it. The reason I read that sentence out of the Sarah book is that it's about happy death. But this short story does not deal with a happy death. It deals with the death by shooting of a father and a sister. There are two brothers who have walked away from the funeral by themselves, sort of semi-delirious, into the back streets of Los Angeles, and they come to a fig tree, and the younger one steps up into the fig tree, and seems like he wants to hurt himself. And the older brother is standing on the ground trying to convince him not to hurt himself. So this is how it starts. Brother of Figs. tie loose, knot tight over his heart, Ben stood in the fig tree. Best ones, the fat ones, right up there. He pointed to the top of the branches. And I'm going up there. Don't know about this, Ben, said Brother Frank. I don't want to lose any more than I've lost. We've lost. Hey, those dress shoes are going to slip. Ben mounted a rung of the fig tree, but the limbs weren't thick, and the gray bark was gnarled and slippery. His brother was halfway up the tree when Ben saw the sagging. Come on, Benny, we've got some beauties right down here, right under my nose. He leaped up and pulled a purple fig from the branches. Man, delicious. I've never tasted better. Try this. Ben snatched a large swollen one. Frank put out his hand, then shielded his eyes from the August sun. The prized fig fell to the sidewalk. For Christ's sake, that was the best one on the whole tree. Ben shouted. Calm down. All right, we're going to move all the way to the end. Ben was now turned away from his brother, breathing heavily. Frank could see the tall frame with its slender shoulder blades vibrate in the white shirt. When he turned around, tie dangling like a noose, he seemed to emerge from the figs themselves. Frank sucked in his breath. Ben had smeared his face with the inside of figs. He let out a ghoulish scream and flew to the ground, hitting a carpet of rotted figs dark as midnight. Now you've done it. Ben reeled, blood spurting out his nose and mouth. I want to die. Ben ran into the street. A parakeet yellow Cadillac and the slow, mindless cruise of a valley dweller swerved over the curb to avoid the man with the camouflaged face. The driver rammed his horn, shouting out the window, and punched it past the strange twosome. Frank ran over after his brother, grabbed him by the neck in the middle of the street, and Ben slumped. Come on, sit over here. Frank pulled him to a brick frill over which peered black-eyed Susans. No smell to these flowers. No smell to any flowers in this whole God-forsaken place. You jerk, you wanted to draw blood, but why your own? Whose else am I going to draw? Yours? Frankie, always with the handkerchief, just like Dad. Frank cleaned up his brother, figuring this handkerchief was going to be stained forever. You're lucky. Looks like only a cut lip and a nosebleed. What about my hands? It was worth it. You don't want to die, Frank said to Ben. Cresting the hill, looking down at the line of cars on both sides of the silent street, up to the circle. How do you know? Because when you called me back east to get out of here, you told me to get out here. You told me you needed me for the rest of your life. Well, need means be here. Ben showed some blood on his teeth as he grinned. I had to take you here. Glad you did. To eat. Uh-huh. Frank caught a fig and put it in his mouth. It's all changed for us now, Ben said. Everything matters. Every drop of the world. Because nothing matters. He drilled his finger into Frank's ribs. Can't waste a minute. From now on, I'm with you. Because it's all gone. Or going. What the hell's the difference? Many in the murmuring crowd at the family home hushed at their crazed, blasphemous smiling. It was assumed they'd been running in the smog. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And now it's a great pleasure to introduce my colleague from the University of Iowa, Mary Hickman. We like to bring also at least one younger writer to remind the older writers what it was all about, and also to give us little jolts of energy. So, Mary?
Thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be included on this reading tour and to be included with such fantastic writers whose work I've admired, and it's been a pleasure to get to travel with them. I've also been so overwhelmed by the beauty of Armenia. We went to the National History Museum and saw relics from thousands of years ago, and it's just been wonderful to get to know your beautiful country. So I'm very happy to be here today and to read to you. I grew up in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, and though my family's originally from the United States, I also worked for, I've had many lives, I think, even for being so young, as one of our traveling companions has said. I worked for a while as a surgical assistant for open heart surgeries, and I like to say to people, I used to have my hand inside the body of strangers. And one of the poems that's been translated for you is about that. It's the heart surgery one. On the flip side of that, I've also had many near-death experiences myself. Once my colleagues hear this poem, they will regret having taken me up on a high mountain today. I'll read it for you. The one thing to know about this is that Buto is a dance form that's referenced in here. That's a Japanese dance form, and it's very much about the body and its animal state, not the high, graceful European ballet, but this kind of bent, animalistic, more acknowledging the fragility of the body kind of dance form. I've had many near-death experiences. Watching Kazuo Ono dancing Mother, I end up thinking, oh mama, mama, my turtle dove, only fairy tales come to mind. The song in the juniper tree sung by the murdered son become a bird. My mother, she killed me, my father, he ate me, my sister Marlene gathered my bones, tied them in a scarf, laid them beneath the juniper tree. In Mother, when the music stops, the spotlight widens to reveal an audience perfectly still. It sounds as if Kazuo calls up North Sea winds from every direction, calls up a landscape of ragged cliffs and swells. Kazuo's rawness must be the rawness of the sea. He renders each pulsating, twisting move of jellyfish in dance. How alien human bodies can become. He has seen thousands of jellies circling, victims of hunger or disease, soldiers buried at war, men he knew in the war. He was a prisoner of war. Tuesday was yesterday, but today is Wednesday. They confirmed Wednesday that he died on Tuesday. Is Tuesday in Japan Wednesday here? In Mother, the gestures are not eroticism, not desire. Instead, they are percussive violence. He stamps ankles into strength. The dance demands he unlearn his upright body, unlock shoulder from spine, disarticulate each confined, trained joint. In Buto, bodies distort beyond etiquette and beyond beauty, becoming crippled ships, bent forest floor. He must unfold his body, loosen the face, and prepare for a face made utterly unfamiliar. Tracking his own corpse, he finds a face so fixed even agony cannot be found there. He dances the sharp chirping of insects, the animals lowing, and thus unmoors his body. People say many things about Kazuo's body. It is a corpse standing, an outcry from somewhere outside the culture of flesh. I find working from life so intimidating. I find it hard to do. I have had many near-death experiences, moments when I certainly might have died. On a mountain road near Taiwan's north coast, I bent over a cliff edge to pick flowers and fell 30 feet. When I looked up, my companion gestured for me to stay still. He was yelling, "Don't move." I moved and felt myself drop 6 inches. Only branches supported me, and below, the cliff roped in mist. As Kazuo builds a dance, it's like adding layers of flesh. I hesitate to create a myth about Kazuo since we have to continue his endeavors. He needed a recipient. We had to be receptive. There is a moment when the image starts to breathe. There is something unsettled about the image, like form passing into a gesture that is live. 8 ghostly white bodies emerge from the sea and scramble over the rocks. They move sideways over sharp rocks, souls splitting. They unfurl long red ribbons from their mouths, something that words can't touch. Exploring caves underwater, squeezing through smaller and smaller openings, but always sure there would be another opening ahead, I was diving without equipment. I saw the reef and a school of squid just beyond. Pardon me. I saw the reef and a school of squid just beyond. When my lungful of air began to run out, I tried to surface, and I saw a hole in the rock leading up. As I swam, the opening narrowed. I had no air left to go back the way I came or look for another way, but I couldn't get through. I thought I'd pass out and drown. I forced myself to push my body upward and shoved my body through the tube of rock until I was scraped and bleeding but breaking the surface. I dragged my body to the surface. And then I just have one more shorter piece, and this is a short poem I wrote about my brother. I once was hanging out with my little brother. We were both children, and he cut his hand very badly. We were home alone, and it was when we lived in China, and we didn't know yet how to speak the language, and I didn't know how to get him to a hospital, and it was extremely scary for me. When I sent him this poem later, he said, "I think that was much more traumatic for you than for me." But I think of this as in honor of him surviving, me being his babysitter. Shenzhen 2. My brother insists that cracking melon seeds bears relation to speech. The only content has been eaten. Shell empty, no content remains. Live action, then silence, or at the most echo. We fill bottle after bottle with husks. When we are on our own, carving our names into trunks in the lychee grove, he cuts his hand. The knife slips, slicing thumb and forefinger. As blood covers his arm, my brother is firework and flag, bright pain and strange happiness. How does one work with chaos as a material for life? I can't predict how the sap of the tree and the blood of the fist will behave. I perch on the branch, touch my heel, grasp my right foot in my left hand, hold cold foot in warm palm and think, now I know myself by heart. Now I know my heart too. The palm shows the measure of the trunk the measure of the torso. I distinguish the layers of my fingers. I feel areas of pain, plumes of pain. Do you see these living figures, I ask? They are flashes of lightning that resemble ideas. They make me understand from there to here. On our way to the hospital, we meet a woman sweeping the street. She picks up a wrapper, spits on it, and presses it to his cut. When she was a child, she says, buying flowers was very bourgeois, but she bought tissue paper and brought it home to make roses. Ropes of bright red firecrackers hang the length of skyscrapers. Lit, they rip across eye and ear with delicate violence as the smell of gunpowder floats back. The real beauty of the Roman candle, the bottle rocket, or the fire flower is that when you ignite it, it fans into new forms. If you hold it in your hands when it lights, fingers become petals of paper and flame. All these symbols, paper, gunpowder, pine trees, I hold these elements in my hands and I ignite them to see what may be made. In the hospital, he shakes with pain on the dingy sheets. I curl up at the foot of the bed. If I shift, the mattress exhales a scent like earth, an inner malady of the sea, a city that has invaded a sleep incautious and entire. I love this flow of sleep that comes down on me like snow as I play dead. Death curdles around me. I hold his foot to comfort him. His attention stops at the thin part of the world. Linen becomes sand and milk, becomes a caress on the skin of my brother who, by playing dead, becomes all child and enters a new experience of home, the tributary of his sources. The resting child is encircled by the impersonal. To it he owes his sudden firmness, perpetually destroying, perpetually rebuilding. Blood, too, is a tissue. Jeh, he mutters. Sister. He sucks red ropes back into sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Our next writer, I think, probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. Peter Balakian is one of America's most important poets, but even more importantly for American readers, he gave us a picture of Armenia and of the genocide, and in so many ways he is the conscience in our country for Armenians. Peter?
Great to be here. And I do want to thank the U.S. Embassy for doing what it's done to make this work, and all the great people working with the embassy. Not enough time to praise them all, but very grateful. The Iowa Writers, International Writers Program has been extraordinary in making this happen and making things like this happen around the world. I really hope this will be a kind of bridge, you know, that will continue to evolve between our two cultures. With me in the middle, why not, right? Thank you, AUA, for having us. I recall being here in 2004 when my memoir came out in Armenian and having a great time on that trip. And I haven't been back since 2010, so this is a real return and a very happy one. So look, I want to read a poem that deals with my first trip to Armenia, 1987. Back in those times, many of you here remember those times. Many of you here do not, right? Am I right? Yeah. So being in Armenia in 1987 was really a revelation for me, you know, and it brought the depth and richness of Armenian culture to life in a way that I have to say was revelatory. You know, it was like an epiphany, like bells went off, you know, lights came on. So I want to just remember that moment in a way in this poem called In Armenia, 1987. You'll all recognize all the encoded images in this poem, but I hope that the presence of Sardarabad will also be obvious to you as the poem kind of leaks down to that part of Armenia and the significance of that town. In Armenia, 1987. Into a basalt cavern I wandered, where the moon slid like a water snake in white skin through the gullies to the blonde and furry wheat. I dug toward the damp smell of a water channel, found a shard of a cross, its lacework, a system of streams wound into stone. Grapes and pomegranates and grapes, pulpy in my hands. Palmettos sawed my palms. A rising moon in the moss-grown stone mirrored the light, where winged griffins, those talismans of blood, flew into the arms of Christ. Down a gully like a volute, I found a way to the dry clay of the border where a scimitar cut the horizon. Pegasus flew out of the tufa walls into the white shroud of Ararat, and the ringing bells slid into the scree. Down there, I felt my name disappear. So a little piece here from my memoir, Black Dog of Fate, Sev Shun Jagara Griza, I think I have it okay. My Armenian's not great, and I apologize for that. So, good. So I want to read from the beginning of a chapter called The Murder of a Nation. Now, I'll say very quickly here that Black Dog of Fate is, in the broadest sense, perhaps, a story about an Armenian American boy's coming of age and his journey from no knowledge of the Armenian past into a descent into the violence of the Armenian genocide and an understanding of what happened to his grandparents and their generation as victims and survivors of 1915. So the story moves between a suburban, happy, sunny childhood in Tenafly, New Jersey, an affluent suburb of New York City on the Jersey side of the bridge, into history. And so in this chapter, the protagonist, the young boy, is now a young guy in his 20s, beginning to write, and he begins to read some texts that deal with the Armenian genocide, the 1915 moment. And the text here is Ambassador Morgenthau's memoir, the famous memoir that brought a continuous narrative of the Armenian genocide into English for the first time. Okay? So a few snippets. The boy, the young man, is on his lunchtime break for his summer job in Lower Manhattan, so it's set in downtown Manhattan, and he's reading a book, and then the book prompts a flashback. I ran to get the check. That was the boy's job. That was my job. I was a mail runner for a steamship company in Lower Manhattan. I ran off to get the check and returned to the office before the bank closed. I went back outside and sat sweating on a bench in Battery Park, a few feet from a steel band and two jugglers slipping balls and bowling pins. The Jehovah's Witnesses were passing out leaflets. The barefoot Hare Krishnas paced in front of me. I could smell the drunk under a fly-ridden raincoat a foot away. I'm skipping around these pages here, so you'll have to follow it. Cut. The central government now announced its intention of gathering the 2 million or more Armenians living in the several sections of the empire and transporting them to this desolate and inhospitable region, the Syrian desert. The real purpose of the deportation was robbery and destruction. It really represented a new method of massacre. When the Turkish authorities gave the orders for these deportations, they were merely giving the death warrant to a whole race. They understood this well, and in their conversations with me, they made no particular attempt to conceal the fact. All through the spring and summer of 1915, the deportations took place. Scarcely a single Armenian, whatever his education or wealth or whatever the social class to which he belonged, was exempted from the order. Cut. I sat on the bench, sipping hot coffee out of a styrofoam cup, and recalled something my grandmother told me when I was 10, as we sat alone on the patio after Sunday dinner. It was late summer because I remember the sound of the cicadas in the maples and how the whole yard sounded like a great shaking rattle. My grandmother sat reclined in a green and white chaise lounge drinking a glass of tan. She wore sunglasses, and all I could see was the hedge of rhododendrons reflected in the dark plastic of her glasses. As usual, she just started in as if she were talking to herself. You know the one about the man who went to Constantinople to seek his fortune? She said. Nope, I said, hoping to indicate that I didn't want to know about the man who went to Constantinople. After he had been in Constantinople for a while, he heard about a man from his village who had also arrived, and because he had left behind his father, mother, brother, sister, and his dog named Manuk, he went to find the man from his village. He was led to a pastry shop where he noticed his fellow villager eating kadayif and drinking coffee. Haji Ovan, he cried as he walked into the pastry shop. Have you come from Bitlis? Yes, Haji Ovan said, cutting his kadayif. What's the news there? What news do you want? How is my dear Manuk? For he missed his dog more than anything. I'm sorry, my friend, but Manuk is dead. Are you telling me that Manuk is dead? The man asked because he couldn't believe it. Yes, my friend, he ate the meat of your mule and died. Does that mean the mule is dead? Yes, my friend, the mule died while hauling your father's gravestone. Are you trying to tell me, Haji Ovan, that my father is dead? Yes, he lived 2 weeks after your mother's death. She died of a broken heart when she heard how your brother died trying to save your sister. Are you telling me that my mother and brother and sister are dead? Why don't you just come out and say it? My family is all dead, my home ruined. I don't know if your home is ruined, Haji Ovan said, but when I left the village, the Turks were tilling the soil where your house once stood. It was one of those bizarre stories my grandmother came out with occasionally that left me bewildered and speechless. As I watched the sun glare off her dark glasses, I sat there in silence, picking at the nylon bands of the chaise lounge until my mother appeared with a tray of watermelon and cheese, and everyone came out and started in on dessert, and I was relieved. Thank you.
And to finish the reading part of this event, I'm going to read 2 quick poems. I should tell you that I grew up probably 20 miles away from Peter, and I had a slightly different childhood. He played American football, and I played soccer. A boy juggling a soccer ball after practice, right foot to left foot, stepping forward and back, to right foot and left foot up to his thigh, holding it on his thigh as he twists around in a circle until it rolls down the inside of his leg like a tickle of sweat, now catching and tapping on the soft side of his foot, and juggling once, twice, 3 times, hopping on one foot like a jump roper in the gym, now trapping and holding the ball in midair, balancing it on the instep of his weak left foot, stepping forward and back, then lifting it overhead until it hangs there, and squaring off his body, he keeps the ball aloft with the nudge of his neck, heading it from side to side, softer and softer, like a dying refrain, until the ball, slowing, balances itself on his hairline, the hot sun and sweat filling his eyes as he jiggles this way and that, and flicking it up gently, hunching his shoulders and tilting his head back. He traps it in the hollow of his neck, and bending at the waist sees his shadow, his dangling t-shirt, the bent blades of brown grass in summer heat, and relaxing, the ball slipping down his back and missing his foot. He wheels around, he marches over the ball as if it were a rock he stumbled into, and pressing his left foot against it, he pushes it against the inside of his right until it pops into the air, is heeled over his head, the rainbow, and settles on his extended thigh before rolling over his knee and down his shin so he can juggle it again from his left foot to his right foot and right foot to left foot to thigh as he wanders on the last day of summer around the empty field. And it's a true story that 2 days after I wrote that poem, I got offered a job coaching a university soccer team. Which is to say that poetry can change your life. This morning we had the good luck to drive to Geghard Church and to see Mount Ararat in the distance. And I've spent a great deal of time in Greece, first when I was a journalist covering the war in Yugoslavia, and then later when I had the good luck to write a book about the holy mountain of Athos, and being in that place of stone this morning and hearing the monastery, hearing the monk sing and then to pray for us, I began to think back about times in Greece. And I thought of the great Greek poet Yanis Ritsos, who wrote a poem called Because. in which every line begins with the word because and then ends with this line. He says, because of this and only this I told you lies. So this is a reply to Yanis Ritsos, a variation on a theme by him. It's called Because. Because the Dead Sea released its hostages, the taste for salt, a rudder and a sail, because a band of Roman slaves disguised in their masters' robes fled across the continent, because one manuscript, one waxen shoal of words burned a monastery down, because the sun spurned the black forest, and windmills ground the peasants into the earth, into the air, into the voice of the boy who cried wolf, because the crowd hissed at the empty stage, and the prompter drank himself to sleep, and the diva hid in the pit, because we let barbed wire replace our wooden faces and fences, because a scream left a trail through the ruined air, because I followed that trail into the woods where my hands dissolved in smoke and rain, because I wandered for days, weeks, until I found myself outside a walled city, a city abandoned hundreds of years ago, because I couldn't scale the walls nor find a way to return to my homeland, and so I settled along a river in the desert, because the river changed course, and its banks crumbled into the dry bed where I was on my knees, speechless and afraid, because whenever I hike into the desert, I talk and talk and talk, because I have never been to the desert, because I refuse to follow any trail whose markings are not completely clear, because I distrust signs, guideposts, land and sea marks, because on my single visit to the ancient city, I rifled the ruins for potsherds and stone tools and was warned never to return, because I heed all warnings, all directives from the crowd, because I won't listen to anyone but myself, because I love to cry wolf, because everything I read smells of smoke, because sometimes I wake at night to find my hands covered with salt, my sheet wrapped around me like a sail, because I can't tell if this is the desert or the sea, because I never learned to read the stars and don't know where we're heading, because of this and more, much more, I hid your name in the well, and here it is again, filling my cup. Thank you. And now we'll take questions from you. I should tell you that there is simultaneous translation, and if you want to ask a question, and I very much hope you do, please come to one of the microphones so that the translator can hear you, okay? And then they'll translate it back to all of us. And I've been advised to tell you that you can ask anything. These writers will answer anything you like. So. This is what in America we would call a pregnant silence. Since we've been shepherded around by a pregnant woman, that seems appropriate. Yes, can you come here?
Hello, welcome. Thank you very much for some very interesting pieces of writing. Is it okay if I direct a specific question to a specific individual?
Please. Yep.
Will the rest of you feel too envious? No. But I'm afraid I've forgotten your name, Mary Hickman. I was wondering, you mentioned that you had many near-death experiences. Now, I didn't know whether this meant incidents whereby you've almost lost your life, which is one thing you described, or whether it was one of those things where people go to the tunnel of life and then they come back and they talk about heaven, things like that. I don't know which one it was, but whichever one it was, perhaps both, how has that informed your writing?
That's a great question. You know, I thought I had had many near-death experiences until I sat in a taxi with Chris Merrill and he told me about the time that bullets were whizzing by his head and he truly almost died. But yes, I think that in this piece particularly, what I'm wanting to think about is maybe the fragility of the human body in some way, that we are always aware of our mortality, and yet we continue to live, just in spite of it or because of it, what that drive is. And so Kazuo Ono, the founder of Buto, the dance movement, he was very interested in that very kind of thing and celebrated it, praised it. So instead of trying to seem indestructible and made of strength, he thought the strength of the body really was its ability to become so weathered. In his last days, he could no longer dance and would dance with just his hands. His body had become so crippled. And I think that the times where I felt like I was going to die or I almost would die, and I somehow pushed myself forward, I pushed my body to the surface, that moment of wanting the body to continue on is something I think about a lot, especially having worked in heart surgery. There were nights when we would have an aneurysm come in, and an aortic aneurysm, and those never end well. Almost never end well. So you would be working 12, 14 hours, no sleep, and yet the person would still die. And so I think that in a lot of my work, mortality comes up, but also recovery and health and that drive towards life. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the wonderful readings. And one of the threads that I sort of picked up on between all of the things that you read was that you were all describing very private, particular instances, but they seem to be in connection with something greater, or in communion with something greater. For all of your works that you read, what is that connection for your aesthetic vision and whatnot?
That's a great question. Gish, do you want to take it on first?
We're all in connection, the grander thing, the transcendence that we're looking for, it's on many levels. But I will say that the thing that, in the passage that I read, that I'm very aware of, is the way that animosity and hostility can, in a moment, just turn, And it's just seemed to me to be something that we must always remember, the way that Mary is trying to remember a certain thing about mortality and the force of life working against that. I think there are times reading the newspaper, it just seems that the world is very black and it's really kind of hopeless. And yet the truth of the matter is the whole reality in a word, a sentence, a glance can completely turn. And I think that maybe in my fiction, among other things, I'm trying to remind people of that. And it's not exactly to give them hope, but to just help them remember.
Peter, Greg, do you want to take it on anyway? I don't see any other questions, so feel free.
Okay, sorry. Well, I read to the class today the first two lines from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Pretty bold, aesthetic. And I think to some extent, although I wouldn't say our words are not, because we know that John was talking about the Word, Christ. But just the fact that he picked the word, he could have said flowers or grass or sky. Instead, he identified God with the Word. So we have I think in just using language in a serious way, an exploratory way, and to some extent trying to find some spirit behind the words, maybe we are, in a sense, stumbling toward the creator. We create, but we create as small creators. But in using words, we're trying to get to the capital C creator.
I guess, again, there's so much to say about this issue, and it really is a good issue for a symposium, but maybe one way into it for me, having written in part about the traumatic Armenian past and the way it's been transmuted across generations, is to say something that Gish has written about really brilliantly in a series of essays that came out of lectures she gave at Harvard several years ago, in which she's interested in the relationship between the independent individual and the interdependent self that sees itself in relation to something other and something larger and something that might embody an idea of community. For me, as a writer, that dynamic, that is the tension between self and otherness, has had a lot to do with history. And for me, the history that's been first readily available has been the Armenian past, because it has been transmitted to me in complicated ways from earlier generations. And I would note that the history of the Armenian past, the genocide past, and so on, was not spoken about in the family I grew up in. It was really repressed. If you read Black Dog of Fate, you know that. I had to work hard to uncover and to decode the crazy strangeness that had been that had been repressed in my own sunny, suburban, affluent childhood. But history comes to be one of those larger othernesses against which the self can see reality through